Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Today, we will be discussing Book 1, Chapter 2 of Deadhouse Gates, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 2 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the book set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's most definitely not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Know that Kamraun and I know that this series is the best fantasy series ever written, and we are approaching this from a purely fanboy point of view, and that we will be providing no literary critique, at least not about the series. Maybe other things. Just pure love, baby, and it's just pure love.
We'll be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
And a quick warning, today's episode may contain copious amounts of blood, death, destructions, and loads of life-altering graphic violence, and it's therefore maybe probably not, I know for a fact, recommended for children in this episode. So,
Yes. Our show is listener-supported. If you'd like to support us, we would really appreciate it. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we are posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we would really like to hear from you, so send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
All right, Chapter 2 continued. We begin this portion of the chapter with a description of Erlitan. The holy city of Erlitan was a city of white stone, rising from the harbor to surround and engulf a vast, flat-topped hill known as Genrob. Belief held that one of the world's first cities was buried within Genrob. Also within the compacted rubble waited the throne of the seven protectors, which legend held was not a throne, but instead a chamber housing a ring of seven raised daises, each sanctified by one of the ascendants who set out to found seven cities. So the legend claims seven cities was founded by seven ascendants. That's interesting.
That's a really interesting thing, and I'm wondering if we meet or will meet at any point in the future. I know because we meet a lot of ascendants in this series.
Right. Curious if any are still alive. Yeah.
Right. It's dangerous business.
Mm-hmm. Being an ascendant? Yes, it is. A lot of competition on that front.
Yes.
Erlitan was 1,000 years old, but Genrob, the ancient city, now a hill of crushed stone, was believed to be 9 times older. An early Falad of Erlitan had begun building on top of the flat top of Genrob to honor the city below. 10-ton white blocks of marble were transported by ship to Erlitan's harbor from nearby quarries, then pulled through the lower districts to the ramps leading to the hill's summit. Temples, estates, gardens, domes, towers, and the Falad's palace rose on top of Genrob. 3 years after the construction was completed, subterranean archways collapsed beneath the immense strains of the new construction. Walls folded, foundation stones slid sideways into the streets, packed solid with dust. Beneath the surface, the dust behaved like water, racing down streets and alleyways into gaping doorways beneath floors, all unseen in the unrelieved darkness of Genrob. On the surface, on a bright dawn marking an anniversary of the Falad rule, the palace sagged, towers toppled, domes split in clouds of white marble dust, and the palace dropped unevenly. In some places, no more than a few feet, in others, over 20 arm spans down into flowing rivers of dust. That sounds almost like a pyroclastic flow coming out of a volcano, doesn't it? It's horrific.
Yeah. Thank you for giving it a name because I had no idea what that was until I looked it up. But yes, it does.
You know, all these volcano movies, you pick up a little bit here and there.
True. I stay away from the volcano. I don't know why, but I don't watch a lot of disaster movies. I don't know why those always bother me for some reason.
Dante's Peak's really good. You seen that?
I have not.
With Pierce Brosnan?
No, I can't remember. I honestly cannot name the last disaster. The last disaster pick I would have seen. Oh my word! I've never seen like The Day After Tomorrow. I've never seen anything. I mean, I've seen South Park riff on The Day After Tomorrow or whatever that is. There's a lot of that stuff I've not seen though.
Yeah, well, Dante's Peak is a smaller scale. It's dealing with one specific volcano. So they're in this town that's by this supposedly dormant volcano, and then it starts to wake up. And Pierce Brosnan, he's had a bad experience in the past.
Sure.
He's haunted by his past, and he comes, and Lyndall Hamilton actually is the mayor of the town. So that's the last movie I saw her in.
Okay. Well, I remember him and her being in it, and I like both of those people an awful lot. But when you said it right there, there's been a bad experience right there. It's like, then I've seen it, but it doesn't matter. I've seen it. It doesn't. If it's an airport movie, you've seen it. You know it. You've seen it.
Yeah, but it's Pierce Brosnan, man.
It is Pierce Brosnan.
You have those actors you like. You watch it
That
because
is
you
true.
want to see them be themselves. You know, it's like George Clooney or whatever.
Well, they can't. That's the problem with a lot of those films. They can't be anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, we'll have to put some thought into that. I wonder if there's a movie I could think of where he doesn't play himself.
Who's that?
Pierce Brosnan.
Oh,
yeah.
No, Pierce Brosnan's a good actor. He's actually can
He
act
is.
pretty
I'm
well.
not saying he's a bad actor, but I mean, most of the movies I remember him from, he's playing basically.
You ever seen The Matador?
No.
Oh my word, dude! The Matador's amazing. It's him and Greg Kinnear. He's a hitman. He's an alcoholic piece of trash hitman. He's the worst human being you'll ever meet. He's awful. Pierce Brosnan's his performance is magnificent, and it's an unusual buddy movie because he goes down south. Greg Kinnear's down in Mexico for a business deal, and one night getting drunk in the hotel bar, he meets Julian, which is Pierce Brosnan, this alcoholic piece of trash hitman, and they form an unusual relationship that bleeds into his real life, and it's a very unusual buddy movie because Brosnan keeps having anxiety issues. Like he can't perform. He can't. He's got people in the crosshairs, and he sees himself as a little boy. So it's that kind of issue. But it's oh my word, it's you must see The Matador.
Okay. I'll have to add it to the list.
The
list is getting built up quite heavily nowadays.
Please.
Yeah. All right. Moving along. Observers in the lower city described the event. It was as if a giant invisible hand had reached down to the crown, closing to gather in every building, crushing them all while pushing down into the hill. The cloud of dust that rose turned the sun into a copper disk for days afterward. The casualties numbered 30,000, including the Falad himself, and of the 3,000 who dwelt and worked within the palace, but one survived. A young cook's helper who was convinced that the beaker he had dropped on the floor a moment before the earthquake was to blame for the entire catastrophe. Driven mad with guilt, he stabbed himself in the heart while standing in the lower city's Merikra? How would you say that?
You're on your own.
This is staying in.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Merikra round, his blood flowing down to drench the paving stones where Fiddler now stood. And what an amazing history to introduce us to Erlitan.
Yes.
Capping it off with this ridiculous story of the lone survivor blaming himself for the entire ordeal is perfection. It's almost black comedy to me, you know?
Well, it is. It is absolutely black comedy. It's hilarious. And in this world, who's to say he didn't cause it?
It's possible, I guess.
It's quite possible.
Man, that puts a different spin on it, doesn't it? Maybe he was responsible for it.
It could be.
Yeah. Fiddler's eyes narrowed as he watched a troop of red swords ride hard through a scattering crowd on the other side of the round. He wore bleached linen robes with the hood pulled up and over his head in the manner of a Grawl tribesman. Fiddler stood motionless on the sacred paving stone and wondered if the rapid thumping of his heart was loud enough to be heard by the crowds as they moved nervously around him. And this sacred paving stone is the one that commemorates the death of that individual who felt he was responsible for the entire catastrophe.
Oh, right.
Fiddler cursed himself for risking a wander through the ancient city. Then he cursed Kalam for delaying their departure until he'd managed to make contact with one of his old agents in the city. Mesla Ebdin, a voice near him hissed. Roughly translated, it meant Malazan lapdogs. The Red Swords were born of 7 cities, yet avowed absolute loyalty to the Empress. They had just begun an independent crackdown on the followers of Dryjna, using their weapons as was typical. These are the same group that Bodin, Felicin, and Heberic saw during the culling. They accompanied Adjunct Tavora.
Okay. Wow.
It gave Heberic the clue to ask Bodin, have you seen the walls of Aaron? Because he was insinuating that he knew the Red Swords were from 7 cities because he had been there.
Okay. all that detail, it just blows me away. How he just slides that stuff so casually in there, and how it adds so much life to things.
Especially this intro to this city.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yes, absolutely.
So we got a little bit of that with Darujistan.
Yeah.
It has the history born on a rumor. The caverns were found below, all the gas to do the gas lamps and everything.
Yes.
It's a very similar feel here with these holy cities where they have this really interesting past history in some cases.
Let me ask you this. I know I love this myself, but is it possibly due because I brought it up last episode about the fact our love of Dune and Lawrence of Arabia. I love the desert for some reason. I don't want to be in the desert, but I'm fascinated by the desert, particularly.
You don't want to be in the desert? Desert's awesome.
I do want to go to the desert, actually. I was actually going to go. I was heading on a trip to Israel when I got the move to come down here, and it was going to interfere with I couldn't have been down here and still done the trip. So that was the only downfall to moving, but the move was much better being down here.
I'll tell you what, Billy.
I got my passport. I'm ready to go.
I work with two different people who last year went to both. Well, okay, so one of them went on a trip to Jerusalem. Then while they were there, they went to Jordan and visited Petra. And then the other one went to Egypt and then went to Jordan and visited Petra.
Wow.
And I've wanted to go to Petra ever since I saw Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That's been a dream of mine.
It's a biblical
I have
city.
to go there at some point.
It's listed in the Bible, bro.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Everywhere over there is just history.
Yeah.
That's what's so cool about it.
Yeah. In hardcore history, Dan Carlin did a series, I think it was called King of Kings. And at the beginning of it, he's talking about how even when the Persians were running that whole region, the region was old. There was stuff there that was 5,000 years old, even at that point.
Yeah.
So these have been settled areas for thousands of years, and a lot of it's lost history.
But as far from a biblical point of view, that's where I believe the seed of humanity is. The seed of humanity is over there. It's the Near East, Africa-ish area, what we talked about, the Northern Africa kind of stuff. Which, so all that, to me, that's the birthplace of humanity. That's where we come from. So that is the birth of history, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, from like civilized stuff, right?
And I mean, as far as human, and civilized, on top of that, and also where the explosion of humanity happened from after 2,000 years ago. That's where the explosion happened, is in the Middle East toward Italy and all that stuff. That stuff just kind of exploded after the Mediterranean. That's where humanity just spread its wings.
Have you seen or heard anything from Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson?
No, I have not.
Okay. Graham Hancock, I think his background is an investigative journalist.
Okay.
He wrote a book called Fingerprints of the Gods, and he started researching different pyramids around the world. And they started finding signs that the constellations that were etched into all these all linked up to about 40,000 years ago.
Okay.
There is a theory that there was some type of civilization prior to the water rising to the level that it's at now. The story of Atlantis, right? Well, is actually probably grounded in some truth, in that there was some civilization that is now currently underwater. But either way, he goes all over the place looking for signs of these linked civilizations. And they're starting to find some areas. I think there's a place in Turkey. I'm going to butcher this. They're unearthing it now.
Well, I'm always real fascinated, of course, by this, but for so much, this even fits in, you understand, with the biblical flood narrative, because there was a lot of, before the flood, there was great evil, and there was all this stuff that there's some real vague stuff about these Nephilim, and I'm sure you've heard that term, the Nephilim. It's always bandied about by people, and in the Jewish literature. And I follow somebody that talks about the spiritual world, and so this is an intriguing concept, because I think that all links up, at least on the spiritual level, with the degradation and the weirdness. Because I know that there was crazy stuff going on, dude. Had to be pretty bad to wipe out the planet.
That place in Turkey is called Göbekli Tepe. And they're just excavating it now, and it's got some old stuff in there.
That's cool.
In terms of the flooding, there's also proof that North America, it was hit by a comet that hit around Canada somewhere. And then it caused this cataclysmic flooding that across the western side of America, especially like in eastern Washington, and then going down through all the way, I think, to Oregon and California in some cases, just these massive, massive floods. You can see signs of it now.
Yeah.
But all of that to say that there's a possibility that man's been around for a lot longer than there's evidence for. And a lot of it's just been washed away. You know,
That's true.
They're just getting around to discovering it now.
Oceans are deep.
Yeah. There's a pretty famous Malazan quote that involves the ocean. A lot of people get the tattoo of that. I see it on the subreddit all the time.
Okay.
When we get to it, I will mention it. It's going to be a couple years, though.
Okay. Right. Yeah, at this rate, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Moving along. We were talking about how the Red Swords were born of 7 cities, and they had just been having an independent crackdown on the followers of Dryzna. So in this round where Fiddler is, half a dozen victims lay unmoving on the ground. 2 small girls crouched beside a woman's body near the dried up fountain. Sprays of blood decorated nearby walls. Fiddler heard the alarms of the Erlitan guard ringing a few streets away. The city's fist had just been informed that the Red Swords were once again defying his inept rule. The Red Swords continued the indiscriminate slaughter up a main avenue leading off from the round, and were soon out of sight. It's interesting. They don't necessarily have any evidence that these people are followers of Dryzna. They're just running around killing whoever.
Yeah. Sorry.
A little overzealous.
I get that impersonation of John Cleese's Galahad in the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Just charging through the streets, just murdering everyone inside. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think these people are apologizing, though.
No. Well, he doesn't apologize. Yeah. Once he calms down, he apologizes. That's a true berserker fury. Galahad goes berserker for sure. I love it, man.
Beggars and thieves swooped in on the bodies, even as the air filled with wailing voices. A hunchbacked pimp gathered up the 2 girls and hobbled out of sight up an alleyway. Fiddler had come close to having his skull split wide open upon entering the round, and found himself in the path of a charging Red Sword. His soldier's experience launched him across the horse's path, forcing the warrior to swing his blade to his shield side, and a final duck beneath the sword took Fiddler past the Red Sword and out of reach. The Red Sword had not bothered pursuing him, turning instead to behead the next hapless citizen, a woman who desperately tried to drag 2 children from the horse's path.
Ouch.
In doing so, do you think Fiddler inadvertently caused that woman to get killed by this guy?
I didn't realize that. I didn't even think about it. He might have. That could be exactly what it is.
Back in the present, Fiddler shook himself and breathed a silent curse. He pushed through the jostling crowd and made for the alley the pimp had used. The tall, leaning buildings to either side shrouded the narrow passage in shadow. There was no one in sight as Fiddler cautiously padded along. He came to a side track between 2 high walls, barely wide enough for a mule and shin deep in dry palm leaves. Behind each high wall was a garden, the tall palm trees entwining their fronds like a roof 20 feet overhead. 30 paces on, the passage came to a dead end, and there crouched the pimp, one knee holding down the youngest girl while he pressed the other girl against the wall and fumbled at her leggings.
Just a real quick thing here. I think that Fid would have gone after these people anyhow.
Yes, I agree.
Even if he hadn't caused it. So that's all I wanted to say real quick.
Yeah, I don't think that's the only reason he's going after it. But I was just curious if through some stroke of bad luck, him dodging had caused the guy to go into the path of the lady.
Knowing how there's a very cause and effect world of Mr. Erikson here, that I'm not going to doubt that he's probably responsible in ducking. And it's not responsible.
Yeah, let's come back to that. Yeah, because I have a question about that later.
Okay.
The pimp's head turned at the sound Fiddler made as he walked through the dried leaves. He had the white skin of a scray and showed blackened teeth in a knowing grin. This mention of scray, we think that's a shortened version of Skara Brae, which is an island that Fiddler and company would have passed on the way down from Rutu Jelba to 7 cities.
Yes.
The pimp said, "Grawl, she's yours for half a jacata once I've broken her skin. The other will cost you more, being younger." Fiddler stepped up to the man and said, "I buy, make wives, 2 jacatas." The pimp snorted and said, "I'll make twice that in a week, 16 jacatas." Fiddler drew the Growl long knife he'd purchased an hour earlier and pressed the edge against the pimp's throat. He said, "2 jacatas and my mercy, Simharal." With wide eyes, the pimp grated, "Done, Growl. Done by the hooded one." Fiddler drew 2 coins from his belt and tossed them on the ground. He stepped back and said, "I take them now." The Simharal fell to his knees, scrabbling through the dried fronds in search of the coins. He said, "Take them, Growl, take them." Fiddler grunted and sheathed his knife. He gathered one girl under each arm, turned his back on the pimp, and walked out of the alley. And this is the kind of behavior that shows Fiddler's true nature. Back to your point.
Yes.
Regardless of whether he had been responsible for that woman getting killed.
Right.
We think that he would have gone after this guy to save these girls. He didn't have to, but he did.
Yes.
He used his own money to pay for them, too.
Yeah. And I think, and this is maybe for you too, but because in Gardens of the Moon, there's such a huge cast. He's such a big part of the whole. And he's almost has a childlike quality in that one because you just see him, running like mad with some stuff here and there when they get excited about blowing things up. But I think this is where I really, really, really fell in love with Fiddler. He's probably one of my more favorite. He's the top of the list of all-time favorite human characters in the series.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple other ones that join him, but top 3, 4 slots for sure. I've named Fiddler my name for every character I've played ever since I've read this series.
Nice.
When I play a video game, it's everything. Everyone's been Fiddler ever since I've read this series.
Wow,
So
nice.
That's how much I love Fiddler. Yeah. So.
Wow. I don't think I've ever named myself after any of the characters in this.
It's okay.
But I mean, Cloud Frog is Cloud Frog. It can't be anything else.
Cloud Frog is Cloud Frog. Can't keep the Cloud Frog down.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we went to that comic book store by us, and they had some vinyl figurines there. And I saw a small one of Cartman and Artemis Clyde Frog.
Oh, my word. Did you get it?
Yeah, I bought it. It was like $30, dude. But I was like, this awesome. Is where I got this name like 20 years ago. And so I've been naming myself that the first time I named myself Cloud Frog was as a barbarian in Diablo 2. It goes back that far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I got it. I have the Cartman. I was thinking of sending you the Cartman just because I only wanted the Clyde Frog. I'll send you that little Cartman.
We just played some chaotic kind of characters and some D&D stuff. And for the longest time, I was always Despiser.
Despiser?
Despiser. Yeah, that's it.
Uh-huh.
It's just a description. It's just the Despiser was all he was.
Yeah.
And that was the name for a long time till Fiddler. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Fiddler's it, dude. Sometimes it's Ben. I will throw a Ben in there occasionally.
If I had to pick a character, you already know. I'm going to give you one guess. Who would I name myself after?
Yeah. It's Kalam, dude.
Really? Not Dasim Ultor? You know how much I love that name.
Oh, I'm so sorry. sorry. Dasim Ultor. It's just, so you have to have when you say it once, you have to have that like. Follow. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I missed the reverence. I forgot the reverence you had for that name more so than Vorian.
Yeah, just as a name, it's so good.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It is good.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
It is very good.
The likelihood that the pimp would attempt any treachery was virtually non-existent. Grawl tribesmen often begged for insults to give cause for their favorite activity of pursuing vendettas, and it was reputedly impossible to sneak up on one from behind, so none dared try. For all that, Fiddler was thankful for the thick carpet of leaves between him and the pimp. I love the Grawl culture. There's some bad dudes. And I guess that's a good choice for a disguise, really.
Yeah. As long as a Grawl doesn't catch you dressed like a Grawl, you're all right.
Oh, yeah. That'd be like impersonating a Navy SEAL and coming across some real Navy SEAls or something. So you find yourself in a heap of trouble.
Yeah. That's a bad deal. Yeah, that's a really bad deal.
Good point.
But
Fiddler exited the alleyway. The girls hung like oversized dolls in his arms, numb with shock. He glanced down at the older one, who was 9 or 10 years old. She stared up at him with wide, dark eyes. He said, "Safe now. If I set you down, can you walk? Can you show me where you live?" After a long moment, she nodded. Fiddler set the girl down and cradled the other in the crook of his arm. She appeared to have fallen asleep. The older child immediately grasped his robes to keep from being pushed away by the crowd, then tugged him along. 10 minutes later, they passed beyond the market district and entered a quieter residential area, the dwellings modest but clean. The girl guided Fiddler toward a side street. As soon as they reached it, children appeared. They shouted and rushed to gather around them. A moment later, 3 armed men burst from a garden gate. They confronted Fiddler with tulwars raised as the crowd of children dispersed on all sides. Fiddler growled, "Nahal Grawl." The woman fell to a red sword. "A Simharal took these 2. I brought them, unbroken. 3 jacadas." One of the men said 2 and spat on the cobbles at Fiddler's feet. He continued, "We found the Simharal." There's another instance of spitting.
Yes.
I love it every time.
A lot, yeah.
So much of it in this book.
Yeah. It's a desert community. I get it. A lot of grit there.
Wasn't Coltane spitting as well? He was in that meeting with Diker.
It's just, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, dude, all those fellows, I just assume that's part of that fellows. Okay, never mind. We just need to stop.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stop.
Fiddler gave them a hard grin. 2 to buy, 1 more to deliver, unbroken. 3. Fair price, cheap for Grawl honor, cheap for Grawl protection. A 4th man spoke from behind Fiddler. He said, "Pay the Grawl, you fools. 100 gold jacadas would not be too much. The nurse and the children were under your protection, yet you fled when the red swords came. If this Grawl had not come upon the children and purchased them, they would now be broken. Pay the coin and bless this Grawl with the Queen of Dreams' favor. Bless him and his family for all time." I love how these 3 guards are all aggressive now, but they ran instead of doing their jobs when they needed to.
Yeah.
And it's like, this guy's bringing them back safe, yet you're brandishing weapons at him. What is the incentive here? You know? The man slowly stepped in front of Fiddler. This is the one that was speaking from behind him. He wore the armor of a private guard with a captain's insignia. His lean face was scarred with the hatched symbol of a veteran of Egatan, and on the backs of his hands were the pitted tracks of incendiary scars. His hard eyes held Fiddler's. He said, "I ask for your trader name, Grawl, so that we may honor you in our prayers." Fiddler hesitated, then gave the man his true name, the one he had been born with long ago. And it's a shame we don't get to learn it.
It is, and if I'm not mistaken, is this the only time that it's hinted at, that he's told somebody his name?
I believe so.
That's pretty cool.
And then this mention of the city of Egatan. We've heard of this before. This is where Dasim Ultor fell.
Yes.
It was very early in Gardens of the Moon where this information was given out.
Yes.
This guy's a veteran of the battle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dasim Ultor.
The man frowned upon hearing Fiddler's name, but made no comment. One of the other guards approached with coins in hand. Fiddler offered the sleeping child to the captain. He said, "It is wrong that she sleeps." The captain received the child with gentle care and said, "We shall have the house healer attend to her." Fiddler glanced around. Clearly, the children belonged to a rich, powerful family, yet the abodes within sight were all relatively small and would be the homes of minor merchants and craft workers. The captain asked, "Will you share a meal with us, Grawl? The children's grandfather will wish to see you." Curious, Fiddler nodded. The captain led him to a low postern gate in a garden wall. The 3 guardsmen moved ahead to open it. The young girl was the first through. The gate opened into a spacious garden. The air was cool and damp, with the breath of an unseen stream trickling through the lush undergrowth. Old fruit and nut trees canopied the stone-lined path. On the other side rose a high wall constructed entirely of murky glass. Rainbow patterns glistened on the panes, beaded with moisture and mottled with mineral stains. Fiddler had never before seen so much glass in one place. That's a pretty interesting thing to have in a garden like this. I wonder what it would take with their technology to make something like that.
I have no idea, but it sounds awesome, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And also, that place
Beautiful.
sounds heavenly compared to my yard.
Well, you live in this season of rot there in Houston, brother. I'm sorry, but any place is better than your backyard in the summer during the rot. I'm sorry. That may have been a tad too strong.
Yeah, man. I could really use a nice stream with a bunch of shade and a nice little breeze. No humidity. It'd be beautiful.
I could be too harsh. I think Houston has 2 seasons. Y'all have the rot, which deserves capitalization, by the way, and winter, right?
Yeah, we had some winters.
It's okay. It's like that in DFW too.
Mm-hmm.
I have a funny temperature comparison for you from my small town to the big cities because I found this out the other night the hard way. My Google speaker is still tied to my old address. I lived in Garland by Dallas. And it's about 3 or 4 in the morning. I said, I asked the question that awakens said device. I don't want to say it right now. I asked what the temperature is. It says 94. And this is Dallas at 4 o'clock in the morning, basically.
Oh, wow.
Garland at 4 o'clock in the morning. And here it was, 78.
Ooh.
And today it is ideal humidity. It's 23%. Now it is hot. It's 99, but it feels like 97.
In the shade, it's probably not too bad. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
I'll tell you what.
Once the sun goes down, it'll be nice here, man.
We have been getting these heat advisories for virtually a month straight now.
We've got it here too.
Prior to June, the last time they've issued these heat advisories in Houston was 2016.
Wow, okay.
And we've been having them almost nonstop for 2 months now.
Now, I'm relatively new to this area. Now, it is hotter and drier. And I say hotter, but it's my parents they live in Fredericksburg, 20 miles to some way from me. And they get it was never over 100 in like 15 years they've been here. This is the first year that it's broken it consistently. We've had these, and then same way here, we've had these past 2 and 3 weeks, we've been having 105-degree days. But my nights are, again, a lot cooler, but you can still feel the heat in it. But we're about to hit the time of the year when the humidity is finally dropped. So again, once the light goes down here, it'll be 10 degrees cooler once the sun goes down with that kind of humidity.
That sounds lovely compared to what we're dealing with here.
It is.
All right. Moving along.
It's very lovely.
Within the garden, a lone door was set in the wall, made of bleached linen stretched over a thin iron frame. Before it stood an old man dressed in a wrinkled orange robe. The deep, rich ochre of his skin was contrasted by a shock of white hair. The girl ran up to hug the man. His amber eyes held steadily on Fiddler. Fiddler dropped to one knee and in his harshest growl accent said, "I beg your blessing, Spirit Walker." The Tano priest's laughter was like blowing sand. He quietly said, "I cannot bless what you are not, sir. But please, join me and Captain Turka in a private repast. I trust these guardians will prove eager to regain their courage in taking care of the children, here within the garden's confines." At least he knows.
Yeah.
He laid a weathered hand on the sleeping child's forehead and said, "Silal protects herself in her own way. Captain, tell the healer she must be drawn back to this world gently." Captain Turka handed the child over to one of the guards and said, "You heard the master. Quickly now." Both children were taken through the linen door. The Tano Spirit Walker gestured and led Fiddler and Turka to the same door at a more sedate pace. Inside the glass-walled room squatted a low iron table with shin-high, hide-bound chairs around it. On the table were bowls holding fruit and chilled meats stained red with spices. A crystal carafe of pale yellow wine had been unstoppered and left to air. The sediment at the carafe's base was 2 fingers thick and made of desert flower buds and the carcasses of white honeybees. The wine's cool, sweet scent permeated the chamber. The inner door was solid wood, set in a marble wall. Small alcoves set within that wall held lit candles displaying flames of assorted colors. Their flickering reflections danced hypnotically on the facing glass. This room sounds really fancy. I bet there's a really nice vibe in there.
Yeah, talk about your feng shui. I would love to see this garden.
Yes.
This is a really, and it sounds like you said there's some way it's brook in there or the water that somehow cools it. And while the rest of the city outside, you get the impression it's dried up, crumpled leaves on the ground everywhere. Here, you get this lush garden.
Mm-hmm. The priest sat down and indicated the other chairs. He said, "Please be seated. I am surprised that a Malazan spy would so jeopardize his disguise by saving the lives of 2 early children. Do you now seek to glean valuable information from a family overwhelmed by gratitude?" Fiddler drew his hood back and sighed. He acknowledged, "I am Malazan, but not a spy. I am disguised to avoid discovery by Malazans." The priest poured the wine and handed Fiddler a goblet and said, "You are a soldier." Fiddler said, "I am." The priest asked, "A deserter?" Fiddler winced and said, "Not by choice. The Empress saw fit to outlaw my regiment." He sipped the flowery, sweet wine. Captain Turka hissed and said, "A bridge burner, a soldier of one arm's host." Fiddler said, "You are well informed, sir." The Tano Spirit Walker gestured toward the bulls and said, "Please, if, after so many years of war, you are seeking a place of peace, you have made a grave error in coming to 7 cities." Fiddler helped himself to some fruit and said, "So I gathered, which is why I am hoping to book passage to Quan Tali as soon as possible." Captain Turka said, "The Kanzu fleet has left Erlatan. Few are the trader ships setting forth on oceanic voyages these days. High taxes." Fiddler nodded and said, "And the prospect of riches that will come with a civil war. Thus it must be overland, at least down to Erin." The priest said, "Unwise." Fiddler responded, "I know." The Tano Spirit Walker shook his head. He said, "Not simply the coming war. To travel to Erin, you must cross the Panpatsan Odan, skirting the holy desert Raraku. From Raraku, the whirlwind of the apocalypse will come forth, and more, there will be a convergence." Fiddler's eyes narrowed as he thought of the soul-taken Denrabi. He said, "As in a drawing together of ascendant powers?" The priest said, "Just so." Fiddler asked, "What will draw them?" The priest said, "A gate. The prophecy of the path of hands, soul-taken and divers. A gate promising something. They are drawn as moths to a flame." Fiddler asked, "Why would shapeshifters have any interest in a Warren's gate? They are hardly a brotherhood, nor are they users of sorcery, at least not in any sophisticated sense." The priest said, "Surprising depth of knowledge for a soldier." Fiddler scowled and said, "Soldiers are always underestimated. I've not spent 15 years fighting imperial wars with my eyes closed. The Emperor clashed with both Treach and Rilandaris outside Li Hang. I was there." Li Hang is northwest of Itko Khan on the continent of Quan Tali. Yeah, and with a name like that, I almost get a Chinese vibe from it. Don't you?
Yes, I do.
And then the mention of Treach and Rilandaris. Didn't we just meet Rilandaris earlier in the book with Icarium and Mappo?
Yes.
And then Treach has been mentioned as his brother.
The other falling out was mentioned there.
Right. And the Emperor clashed with both of them outside of Li Hang. Interesting.
Yeah. Pretty bad fella.
Mm-hmm. The priest bowed his head in apology. He quietly said, "I have no answers to your questions. Indeed, I do not think even the soul-taken and divers are fully aware of what they seek. Like salmon returning to the waters where they were born, they act on instinct, a visceral yearning and a promise only sensed." He folded his hands together and continued, "There is no unification among shapeshifters. Each stands alone. This path of hands is perhaps a means to ascendancy for the victor." Fiddler drew a slow, unsteady breath. He said, "Ascendancy means power. Power means control. Should one shapeshifter attain ascendancy," the priest said, "domination of its own kind, yes. Such an event would have repercussions. In any case, friend, the wastelands could never be called safe, but the months to come shall turn the Odan into a place of savage horror. This much I know with certainty." Fiddler said, "Thank you for the warning." The priest said, "Yet it shall not deter you." Fiddler said, "I am afraid not." The priest said, "Then it befalls me to offer you some protection for your journey. Captain, if you would be so kind." Captain Turka rose and departed. The priest said, "An outlawed soldier who will risk his life to return to the heart of the empire that has sentenced him to death. The need must be great." Fiddler shrugged. The priest continued, "The bridge burners are remembered here in 7 cities. A name that is cursed, yet admired all the same. You were honorable soldiers fighting in a dishonorable war. It is said the regiment was honed in the heat and scorched rock of the holy desert Raraku in pursuit of a Falad company of wizards. That is a story I would like to hear sometime, so that it may be shaped into song."
Yes, I was agreeing with him. I was like giving an amen. I would like to hear that sometime. I'm like, yes.
Agreed. And chasing a company of wizards, note that detail. There's a company of wizards being chased across the desert.
Yes. And I love the fact that the bridge burners engender that kind of respect even for their enemies.
Yeah.
That really says something, doesn't it? Oh, glorious warrior.
It absolutely does. If your previous enemies have a begrudging respect for you because of the way you conducted yourself, that says something pretty serious, I think.
Yes, it does. Especially I get the vibe that this culture is very much a, they respect leadership.
It's an honor-bound culture, right?
Yes, yes. So whoever has risen to the top, they got respect unless somebody else takes them off the top. They usually keep that attitude.
Fiddler's eyes widened. He thought, a spirit walker's sorcery was sung. No other rituals were required. Although devoted to peace, the power in a Tano song was said to be immense. He wondered what such a creation would do to the bridge burners. The Tano spirit walker seemed to understand the question, and he smiled, then said, such a song has never before been attempted. There is in a Tano song the potential for ascendancy, but can an entire regiment ascend? Truly a question deserving an answer. That sounds like pretty powerful sorcery. The ability to elevate a large number of individuals to ascendancy at once?
Yeah, it's really next level. I mean, it's kind of the joke about wealthy and rich. You know, this is wealth. This is this is very wealthy. To have that kind of power to bestow ascendancy.
He's never attempted it before, though, right?
No, he hasn't attempted it before, but it's not. It sounds like somebody has. It's because they said it's been hinted that it can do it. So you know, there's been folks that have done it more than once. I'm sure. I've tried it.
Maybe, or maybe with great power comes great responsibility. This guy seems pretty level-headed and chill.
He's real Jedi.
Yeah, I get that. That's a really good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Very Obi-Wan.
Yes, very truly Obi-Wan for sure. Old man Obi-Wan. Yes. Learned Obi-Wan. Correct. Aged.
Fiddler sighed and said, had I the time, I would give you that story. The priest said it would take but a moment. Fiddler asked, what do you mean? The old priest raised a long-fingered, wrinkled hand. He said, if you were to let me touch you, I would know your history. Fiddler recoiled. The Tenno Spirit Walker sighed and said, ah, you fear I would be careless with your secrets. Fiddler said, I fear that your possessing them would endanger your life, nor are all of my memories honorable. The priest tilted his head back and laughed. He said, if they were all honorable, friend, you would be more deserving of this robe than I. Forgive me my bold request then. Again, this priest sounds like a really level-headed and decent individual.
Yes.
I particularly enjoyed this conversation between him and Fiddler. It's such a random occurrence brought on by Fiddler being a good person.
I know it. I had almost forgotten this scene, and this is a scene I really enjoy. And if for some reason, because you brought up, you said Obi-Wan, for some reason I'm reminded. I got a Tatooine vibe. They're inside Obi-Wan's hut. It's really, it's nice and cool in the hut. You know, It's kind of that. For some reason, I like that spot. But it's such a it's so casual meeting, but yet so important.
Captain Turca returned, carrying a small chest of weathered wood the color of sand. He set it down on the table before the priest, who raised the lid and reached inside. He said, Raraku was once a sea. He withdrew a bleached white conch shell and continued, such remnants can be found in the holy desert, provided you know the location of the ancient shores. In addition to the memory song contained within it of that inland sea, other songs have been invested. He glanced up and met Fiddler's eyes. He said, my own songs of power. Please accept this gift in gratitude for saving the lives and honor of my granddaughters. That is quite the generous offering from him.
Yeah, wow, is right.
Fiddler bowed as the old priest set the conch shell into his hands. He said, thank you, Tenno Spirit Walker. Your gift offers protection, then? The priest smiled and said, of a sort. After a moment, he rose from his seat and said, we shall not keep you any longer, bridge burner. Fiddler quickly stood. The priest said, Captain Turca will see you out. He stepped close and laid a hand on Fiddler's shoulder, then said, Kimlock Spirit Walker thanks you. The conch shell in his hands, Fiddler was ushered from the priest's presence. Outside in the garden, the water-cooled air plucked at the sweat on Fiddler's brow. Kimlock, he muttered under his breath. Turca grunted beside him as they walked the path to the back gate. He said, his first guest in 11 years. Do you comprehend the honor bestowed upon you, Bridgeburner? Fiddler said, clearly he values his granddaughters. 11 years, you say? Then his last guest would have been, Captain Turca said, High Fist Dujek One Arm of the Malazan Empire. Wow. The first person in 11 years, and the prior meeting was Dujek?
Wow.
And this is the thing I wanted to circle back to.
Okay.
Do you think this meeting was meant to take place, or is it just luck?
Meant to take place, I believe.
So then we're getting into fate a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and also if it's not, it's a heck of a it's a long wait for it to line up like this for luck.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a lot of luck of random stuff just happening for Fiddler and Kimlock to meet like that. It's almost like it was meant to happen.
Yeah, that's why I think it was. That's why I say I think it was fated to happen. But the other thing here was that I missed this the first couple times I've read this, but that's where I noticed it, is that, he turned away from shaking the man's hand, but the guy touched his shoulder.
Oh, he touched his, yeah. Wow, he put his hand on Fiddler's shoulder.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't notice that either. That's an important detail.
It's a very important detail because I missed where it happens because it's brought up. You will have to remember that.
Okay.
So I saw it this time. It's that was very important detail. So there you go.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I completely missed that. That's awesome, dude. Good catch.
All right, thank you.
Fiddler said, negotiating the peaceful surrender of Karakarang, the holy city of the Tano cult. Kimlock claimed he could destroy the Malazan armies utterly, yet he capitulated, and his name is now legendary for empty threats. Turka snorted and said, he opened the gates of his city because he values life above all things. He took the measure of your empire and realized that the death of thousands meant nothing to it. Malaz would have what it desired, and what it desired was Karakarang. Fiddler grimaced. With heavy sarcasm, he said, and if that meant bringing the Talan Imas to the holy city, to do to it what they did to Aaron, then we would have done just that. I doubt even Kimlock's sorcery could hold back the Talan Imas. They stood at the gate, and Turka swung it open. He had old pain in his dark eyes. He said, as did Kimlock. The slaughter at Aaron revealed the Empire's madness. Fiddler snapped. What happened during the Aaron Rebellion was a mistake. No command was ever given to the Logros Talan Imas. Turka's only reply was a sour, bitter grin as he gestured to the street beyond. He said, go in peace, Bridgeburner. Irritated, Fiddler left. As a reminder, the Logros Talan Imas, these are the only Talan Imas that we know of.
Yes.
They're all the ones that took the vow together, and Tool was among them when they took the vow.
Yes. 300,000 years ago.
Long time.
I always see that terrible thing whenever I'm watching videos. It's like a few eternities later.
Oh, yeah. The French intermission
yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
As Fiddler entered their quarters, Moby squealed in delight and launched himself across the narrow room to collide with Fiddler's chest in a frenzied flap of wings and clutching limbs. Fiddler swore and pushed Moby away as he attempted a throat-crushing embrace. He crossed the threshold and closed the door behind him. From the shadows at the far end of the room, Kalam rumbled, I was starting to get worried. Fiddler said, got distracted. Kalam asked, trouble? Fiddler shrugged and asked, where are the others? Kalam replied, in the garden. On his way over, Fiddler stopped by his backpack, then crouched and set the Tano shell inside. He pushed it into the bundle of a spare shirt. Kalam poured Fiddler a jug of watered wine as he joined him at the small table, then refilled his own. He asked, well? Fiddler said, a cusser in an eggshell. The walls are crowded with symbols. I'd guess no more than a week. Then the streets run red. Kalam said, we've horses, mules, and supplies. We should be nearing the Odan by then. Safer out there. Fiddler eyed his companion. A brace of knives rested on the pitted tabletop in front of the assassin, a wet stone beside them. Fiddler said, maybe, maybe not. Kalam asked, the hands on the walls? Fiddler grunted, you noticed them. Kalam said, symbols of insurrection aplenty, meeting places announced, rituals to Dryjna advertised. I can read all of that as well as any other native. But those unhuman handprints are something else entirely. Kalam leaned forward and picked up a knife in each hand. He idly crossed the blued blades. He said, they seem to indicate a direction, south. Fiddler said, Panpatsan Odan, it's a convergence. Unhuman handprints indicating a direction south. Do you think those are made by Soul Taken and divers?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. See, I got a question for you. Do you think the divers thing, because it's mentioned like a fever, is it like a werewolf thing?
I don't
Not
know.
necessarily wolves, but it's like it's passed some way, and they become whatever they become. But I'm always kind of curious because I don't ever know if it's ever really. This is the only book that goes more into this than anything than any other books. But it never really. I don't think it really goes into it a whole lot about what it is. But when they're animals, do you think they have a hard time and wrestle for control, trying to be human or the beast?
We're talking about divers or soul taken right now?
I get divers, soul taken. We know that they maintain their individuality because that one is speaking to them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then Robbie spoke to him in their minds.
Right.
And he was soul taken.
Well, the divers was Rillandaris, and he was speaking with them as well.
Was he still in his wolf shape though, or was he was in wolf shape?
He was in a desert wolf shape.
Okay. That's what it was. Okay.
I don't have any concrete evidence, but here's my suspicion. I think the divers can become mad because it's almost like splitting themselves into multiples, and if each maintains some semblance of a little bit of individuality, but it's like a hive mind, I could see how you could potentially go crazy.
Yeah, because they all want to maintain individuality
a little bit, but they're linked together.
Who's the primary? It's like it becomes weird once you're not the is like is the primary self fighting for primary self position always?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's what it sounds like. You're kind of saying the same thing, though. I think you're kind of thinking because when Rillandaris does talk to them, it's not like he seems not very coherent, and he's only thinking about killing and eating.
Right, and then they all flinched simultaneously when they found out it was Mappo and Icarium.
Yes, they did. They didn't want that fight.
No, but that kind of shows that it's all the single consciousness too still.
Yes, that is true. Okay, thank you. I think that helps me. Thank you. Okay.
The fact remains that it's still difficult to maintain their sanity when they split up like that.
I think maybe the ancient ones are the ones that are the only ones that have a better sense of self because they've been around longer, maybe.
Possibly.
I don't know if Rillandaris is ancient though.
Pretty old.
That's what I would think.
Him and Treach are pretty old. I want to say they're from the First Empire.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, so that's pretty old.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Kalam went still, his dark eyes on the blades crossed before him. He said, "That's not a rumor I've heard yet." And this is the rumor of the convergence. Fiddler said, "It's Kimlock's belief." Kalam cursed and exclaimed, "Kimlock? He's in the city?" Fiddler said, "So it's said," and took another mouthful of wine. He knew that telling Kalam of his adventures and his meeting with the Spirit Walker would send Kalam out through the door, and Kimlock to Hood's gates. Kimlock, his family, his guards, everyone. The man sitting across from him would take no chances. He thought, "Another gift to you, Kimlock, my silence." And as much as I like Kalam, I would hope that he wouldn't do something like that. But this is his homeland, and maybe there's some old story there that would make him want to do this.
That might be, but he could also just be a person that believes that Kimlock is a traitor and didn't do this to save lives.
Yeah, that's the backstory. There's some history there that might cause him to go through that. But then killing everybody there besides Kimlock?
Yeah, especially the little girls that he just saved. That's kind of harsh to think that your friend would do that.
Yeah, but these are flawed characters.
They are.
Maybe he would do that.
Dude, Kalam is a machine. If he has to machine up and do something, he will. He will.
But you know what? That might have been the old Kalam.
That's true.
I'm just going to leave it at that's the old Kalam.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
They heard footsteps in the back hallway, and a moment later, Crocus appeared. He complained, "It's as dark as a cave in here." Fiddler demanded, "Where's Absalar?" Crocus clapped back, "In the garden. Where else?" Fiddler subsided. Remnants of his old unease still clung to him. He thought, when she was out of sight, trouble would come from it. When she was out of sight, you watched your back. It was still hard to accept that the girl was no longer what she'd been. Besides, if the patron of assassins chose once more to possess her, the first warning we'd get would be a knife blade across the throat. He needed the taut muscles of his neck and side. Crocus dragged a chair to the table, sat in it, and reached for the wine. He pronounced, "We're tired of waiting. If we have to cross this damned land, then let's do it. There's a steaming pile of rubbish behind the garden wall, clogging up the sewage gutter, crawling with rats. The air is hot and so thick with flies you can barely breathe. We'll catch a plague if we stay here much longer. Kamraun said, let's hope it's the blue tongue, then. Crocus asked, what's that? Fiddler explained, your tongue swells up and turns blue. Crocus asked, what's so good about that? Fiddler responded, you can't talk. And on that note, we are going to stop and come back and finish the chapter next week.
Yep.
For standout moments, I particularly enjoyed the backstory for Erlitan and the additional detail about the lone survivor blaming himself for the entire incident.
Oh, absolutely. I love all that stuff. He's you know, I get it. Deadhouse Gates, he's really got his legs up under him. The writing is so much deeper, so much more touching and personal.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels now this city is so very real.
You definitely see how much he's progressed as a writer, because I think Gardens of the Moon was written quite a few years before he tackled Deadhouse Gates.
Okay, probably so. I could see that.
The next thing I enjoyed was Fiddler being a good person and putting himself at risk to rescue those girls.
Yes, and as I pointed out, this is a major point of my love for Fiddler is based on this, just coming to rescue little girls and stepping into the heat of the fire and doesn't even think about it, just jumps into it and goes after it.
Right, does the right thing.
Yeah.
That conversation between Fiddler and Kimlock is really good, and I like Kimlock as a character.
Yes, I do too. I would like to get to know him better, a lot better.
Right.
Put him on that list.
And you did a really good job of bringing up the Jedi in relation to him, because I think that's a really good description of the kind of person that he is. Good call on that one.
Because, well, I mean, everyone, and I could see how everyone would see he is a traitor, but he's not, because he saved thousands upon thousands of lives. Because he's right, the Empire's insane, dude. They would happily, they're not insane. They just got the resources to grind up thousands of people. They got lots of grist for the mill. What
I'm learning on this read through is so much of these characters, what they do, it's just a matter of whose viewpoint you're looking at it from.
Yes. And that's the one thing I think I've loved this series for that same thing.
This could devolve into the Empire did nothing wrong speech, because it's just from a particular point of view.
Right. Those left-wing gorillas come blasted, flying out of space.
You got to have some order in the galaxy. You can't just have these people running around doing all this crazy stuff.
Chaos.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The revelation that Kimlock hadn't had a guest in 11 years and the prior guest was Dujek is really cool.
Yeah, that is impressive. That tells you how important this meeting is.
Yes.
Right there.
Really puts some perspective on that as well.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah. Really cool.
And I enjoy the way Kalam and Fiddler are taking shots at Crocus. It's like two older brothers picking on a younger sibling. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I love this group traveling here for some reason. It's a tight group of people that we've met and we got to know a little bit, but we'll get intimately familiar with them. We have a chance to get to know them in this book, and I really enjoy them being put together.
Yes.
It's really fun. It's really cool.
Yeah, at first you might be like, they split up the bridge burner party. I think it's a good choice to have them split.
Yes, great choice. Yes.
Cool.
Fantastic. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, great job tonight.
Great episode, man. I really enjoyed it.
You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
No, just had a really good time, folks. Really enjoy y'all listening to the show, and y'all have a good week.
Yes,
enjoy the show.
Thank you. And we will see you next week.
See y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.